So where is Austin, Texas? Well, it's in Texas, right in the middle of the state. It's usually really hot there, so I'm enjoying a little cool weather now, just to cool off a little bit. All right, so today we are going to be talking about KNIME Server. When we do these talks, we do what we call what's new and what's cooking. By what's new, we mean what's in the last release since the last summit, so the last couple of releases. And so the stuff that we talk about and what's new, it's available now in Server 4.8.1. The what's cooking is kind of what's on the roadmap. We'll just give a little bit of that today. We're going to concentrate more on the what's new. All right. Wrong one. Okay, so this was a slide that Thomas showed, I think on Monday, just to kind of give you an overview of KNIME Server and its functionality, focusing on collaboration, on automation, focusing on management and deployment. Right, so we'll talk about some of the new features that fit into those categories. Oh, and I want to say John Fuller is our product owner for KNIME Server. He would usually be up here giving this talk. He's back home in Zurich this week because his wife is getting ready to have their first baby. So just wanted to wish John and his family best wishes. Okay, so I think Iris will be talking or introducing these talks, but these are 3 other talks that will be happening after mine. Really focused on KNIME Server and how it's being used to productionize data science. A little bit of a background. When we talk about KNIME Server, we actually deploy that in 3 different editions. There's Server Large, which is kind of our enterprise edition. It has integration with LDAP. It has distributed executors, lots of other features. Server Medium, kind of meant for those maybe smaller organizations, department level, if you like to say it that way. Server Small, kind of small teams just getting started. Large, medium, small doesn't mean like one small can handle not as much data as medium or something like that. It's really just more about the features that are available. If you want to look in that and kind of get more information about the feature matrix, it's actually online at knime.com. And it shows all the additions and all the features that are there, which ones are in which one. Okay, so let's talk about what's new in KNIME Server. So we do support on-premise implementations or deployments of KNIME Server, of course, and then we also support AWS Cloud and also Azure Cloud. So there we're actually in the marketplace on those 2 cloud platforms, which means you can actually go to the marketplace, like on AWS, and within a few clicks, you can actually have KNIME Server up and running in the cloud, ready to use. Same thing on Azure. We are looking at Google Cloud Platform as an addition. We actually have some customers that run on Google Cloud Platform today. They're kind of building it themselves as they go. But we are looking at adding that hopefully by the end of this year. So I don't have an exact time on that, but we are working with Google and trying to get that going so we can get into their marketplace also. Okay, a few marketplace updates. We added KNIME Server Small recently in AWS. Before we had just KNIME Server Medium. And KNIME Server BYOL, which is not bring your own liquor, but bring your own license. You can bring liquor if you like to. Totally up to you. But so bring your own license means you buy it through the marketplace, and then you come to KNIME and you kind of get a license through us. But for Server Small and Medium, you don't have to get a license through us. You just start it up, and then you pay a per hour charge. You can actually get an annual subscription also, but normally it's an hourly subscription, and you just kind of pay as you go. KNIME Server Small also includes a free trial. So if you want to get a 30-day free trial with KNIME Server Small, just start it up in the Amazon cloud, and you can use it for free for 30 days. After 30 days, it automatically converts into a paid subscription. Okay, so one thing that a new feature that's in KNIME Server Large with the last release, it was in preview for a couple of releases before that, is what we call distributed executors. So in the KNIME Server as it exists before distributed executors, the executor that actually runs the workflows on the server, it lived on the same machine as the server application itself. With the distributed executors, we've actually split those 2. So the executors can run on different machines, and you can have multiple ones of them running. So what that allows you to do is just handle more load, right? So you can have more jobs running concurrently. And the nice thing about running it, like when we support this on AWS and Azure, it supports auto-scaling. So that way you can have not only scale up and scale down, but it can be very elastic. So for example, with auto-scaling groups on AWS, you can have metrics like CPU utilization. Let's say if it's CPU utilization for the group gets over 75%, then that will trigger an auto-scaling event. And that event would cause it to start another KNIME executor, the executor would join the group and then start taking on jobs. And then as the load goes down, the opposite happens. Like we get a trigger of a scaled down event, and then one of the executors would go away. And that's really a cost-saving measure. So that way you can have kind of a minimum base of executors that you weren't running all the time to meet demand. And then as demand increases, you can increase up to some maximum number. And you want that maximum number because you don't want to just scale infinitely because you're having to pay for each of those executors as they start up. They are what is called in AWS lingo build AMIs. So an AMI is an Amazon Machine Image. You're billed per hour for those. So that way you kind of pay as you go for the capacity that you want. On Azure Marketplace, before we just had the server and BYO, bring your own license kind of farm, but we actually added recently for the KNIME Server Medium running on Azure. And again, that's a kind of pay-as-you-go model. So you can go to Azure Marketplace, get an offer for KNIME Server, run it, and it's just charged to your account. So you get charged for the resources that are used within Azure, like the VM instance that's run, but then you also get charged for the KNIME software. Okay, so one thing within Server that's really important are REST APIs, and I think we've talked about REST APIs a couple of times. So an API is just a programming interface into the web server, into the KNIME server. REST APIs are kind of a special form of APIs. They're usually used like with web services and web applications. And we have kind of two different APIs that we're going to talk about today. First one is for workflows. So whenever you deploy a workflow onto the KNIME server, it automatically has an API for that workflow that gets generated. And then you can use that API to do all sorts of things with the workflow, but the most important one is to execute it. So you can actually pass in payload data to the workflow through this REST API. It can run the workflow using that data, and then it can return data back from that call through the REST API. You can also use the REST API of the server to invoke server functions. So if you wanted to build your own programmatic way to talk to KNIME Server, maybe you want to integrate it with some of your applications, you could schedule jobs, you could look at the status of jobs, anything you can do like through the GUI or through the KNIME Analytics platform with the web server, you can do through these REST APIs. So if you look here, let me see if this pointer works. Yes, there you go. If you're in a KNIME Analytics platform and you've deployed a workflow to the server, if you right-click on that workflow, you'll see a Show API definition in the menu item there, one of the menu items. That's going to bring up a Swagger page. Swagger is also known as Open API. It's a kind of way of defining REST APIs. And so this brings up a nice HTML page, very well formatted, very easy to use. And you can actually go to the execution method. Oops, that was the wrong button. The execution method. It's a post that allows you to send data. And you can even try it out. So you can actually go to this page. It's going to show you what the input looks like. It's going to show you what the output will look like. You can actually type in some data and kind of play around with it. The really nice thing about this is if someone in your like maybe IT group or application group is building some sort of application that's going to interface with this, they don't have to know anything about KNIME. You just send the URL to this page to them, and they'll have all the information they need to know to interface with this workflow. Okay, so a new feature for the server, though, is that we have actually converted all of the EJBs. If you speak JavaSpeak, that means something to you. We converted all of those interfaces into REST APIs. And what that means is it makes it really easy for you to now interface with the server. In fact, I've actually built workflows that use our REST nodes, like gets and puts and post, and you can actually use that to talk to the server. So you're running a workflow that talks to the server. You can actually deploy that workflow to the server and have the server talk to itself. It's kind of interesting. So thanks for laughing. So anyway, right, so if you're on the web portal, so this is through the web browser, if you look at the bottom, there's a REST API link. That again will, if you click on it, that'll open up a new browser window or tab, and then you can see that full REST API. And this is really nice because you can play around with it. It really gives you all the information you need to build out a REST interface into the server. Yep, so there's all kinds of cool things you can do with that. Actually, I was working with a customer, and they wanted some way of like for certain times of the quarter, they want to turn off all scheduled jobs. They were having to go through and kind of do that manually. So we actually built a workflow that makes a REST call into the server, give me all the scheduled jobs, disable all of them, and then you're done. And instead of taking them maybe hours to find all the jobs and kind of turn them off, they were able to do it by just running this workflow. And they were ready to turn it back on, they just ran it again. So the REST API can be really useful. Okay, a new feature in KNIME Server is one we call job pools. So this is really useful, again, kind of going back to the REST API for a workflow. So if you have a workflow that you want to deploy, and maybe it's applying a model, like examples here are sentiment prediction, churn scores, chemical property. I mean, whatever you're doing where you want to pass some data into a workflow, have it run, and then return some data back through that REST API, you can actually put it into a job pool. And why would you want to do that? If you look here, you can see we have a job pool running. We have 4 workflows that are preloaded and ready to go. And so what's good about that is anytime you receive a REST API, within the world of REST, any kind of API calls, latency is a big deal, right? So you don't want the latency to be too big, the time from when you make the call until when it's done. And having a job pool cuts down the latency quite a bit, and it actually makes it very consistent. So the idea is that when a call comes in, the server gets it, it says, is there a job pool for this? Yes, there is. Let me grab one of these already loaded workflows from the job pool, run it, put it back into the job pool, and that way you cut down on your latency quite a bit. So right now, the only way to enable job pools is through the REST API itself. So you actually have to make a call on a workflow to say, I want the job pool for this workflow to be 4 or 6 or 10, whatever it may be. And then those will get preloaded up by the server. The server will remember that, so if you have to like restart the server, it's going to remember it has a job pool for that and restart the workflows for you automatically. Again, it's all about cutting down on the latency of your REST calls. Okay, let's talk about managing workflows or managing the KNIME server a bit. So if you're working in an organization where you have a couple of people using the KNIME Analytics platform, kind of managing that by hand is not too bad. Once you get to tens of people, hundreds of people, we even have customers who have thousands of KNIME Analytics platform users. It really gets out of hand quickly. And so this feature is really all about supporting those hundreds and thousands of users. Easier IT operations because you're going to centralize most of your configuration within the KNIME server. You can manage analytics platform preferences centrally, so that way you don't have to go to everybody and say, hey, set this preference because this is how we do things in this company. You can include dependencies like driver files, so JDBC drivers. Every time maybe you get a new user come on to use KNIME Analytics platform, you don't want to have to tell them, okay, go download this jar file from this vendor, install it, here's how you do it. This will all get done automatically. You can deliver updates to configurations automatically. So if things change in the server and you from your desktop have registered with the server, you'll get those changes done automatically. You can also apply custom logos and messages in the welcome page within the KNIME Analytics platform. So when you bring up the KNIME Analytics platform, you get that nice welcome page, and it tells you all about KNIME. You can actually have it tell you all about your company. And this is really great for the people who are managing the server, because they can then send messages out through that. They can put links to different things, maybe different, you have your own documentation around kind of getting started with KNIME, whatever that may be. It's totally up to you and how you want to customize it. Okay, so here's like the welcome page. So we can do things like add a custom support email address. So that way, they would just click on that and it would send an email to your support group. You can add your own company logo. This welcome area on the page can be totally set up by you, whatever you want it to be. It can have links. It's fully HTML. So really lots of flexibility in this area to work with. You can also add your own update site. So this is really nice if you've built your own extensions to KNIME. And you don't want to, they're not ones that are public. They're ones that are kind of private to your company. It's your IP, you've built it. But you want people that are using KNIME within your company to use these. And so the update site is a way of, if you're familiar, wrong button. If you're familiar with KNIME, it allows you to install new extensions into KNIME. And so this update site gets added to every KNIME Analytics platform, and that way new users, you could tell them, hey, just go to this update site, install these extensions, and you're good to go. And that way, you're very consistent about how they get that update site and how do they install those extensions. Okay, so kind of thinking about this, you're going to have multiple groups within, within your user space. Different departments, each department may have different needs. For example, here we're saying the marketing group has Windows 10, they use Hive, they use Spark. The finance group, though, uses Windows 7. They use Oracle and Microsoft Access. And then the R&D team, they use Linux and Mac OS, and they use Python and R. So very different requirements from all these different groups. So how would we handle that? So what we would do, we'd actually create a client profile for each one of those groups. Excuse me. And these are made on the server. So you create the client profile on the server, and then they actually then get exposed to any of the KNIME analytic platforms that are running that are connected to it. I'll show you how to connect it here in just a minute. So we built out these client profiles. These clients can then connect to the server, and then they decide which profiles they want to use, and then that keeps them up to date with that profile. So as an administrator, if you go back and you change any of these profiles, those changes will automatically get pushed out to all of those users. So you don't have to go to every user and say, hey, there's a new driver version, go download it, please. It just happens automatically. Okay, if you're using the KNIME Analytics platform, kind of what this looks like is you would just go into Preferences. Within the Preferences, there's a new tab called Customization Profiles, and it allows you to enable it. Once you enable it, you'll get a list of servers that you're connected to, and we'll automatically go out and pull that server and say, what profiles do you have? And then you could just click whatever profiles are applicable to you. So in this example, we use default, and we use Windows, and we click OK. And once we click OK, we're going to have to restart KNIME because it's going to apply all those preferences, all those default preferences. Once it comes back, you're good to go. And any changes that happen will automatically happen, and you're kind of on board with the profiles. You can always change your profiles. Maybe you change groups, or maybe profiles change, or a new profile comes available. And the order that you put these in is important because that's how they'll get applied. And you can use these little arrows to change the order. Okay, so let's talk about automation of workflow execution. All right, so when I started at KNIME almost 2 years ago, when I would run a job on the server, I would not see anything. It was just running. I got no view into what was happening, and I was very upset. I mean, what's my workflow doing, right? Is it happy? Is it running? Is it playing nice with the other workflows? I have no idea. So along came this new feature that we called Job View. And what Job View allowed you to do is actually click on a running job from the KNIME Analytics platform, and you would get this really nice view of the job as it's running. It almost looked like you were running it locally, right? But it was just a kind of read-only view, and it updated every now and then, every few seconds. It was very nice, though. You could, if workflow would fail, you could see kind of where it failed and got that instant feedback. Or maybe a job hung for some reason, or it was timing out on some database connection, whatever it may be. It was really easy to see kind of what was going on. Okay, remote workflow editor, though, takes that to the next level. It's basically allowing you to not only view what's going on, but also to run individual nodes, look at the output of a node. If a node failed, you can get detailed status of what happened. You can actually change a node. You can change the configuration settings, and you can rerun it. And this is all running on the server, right? This isn't running on your local box, although it almost looks like it's running on your local box. There's a little bit of a bar at the top that tells you, oh, hey, by the way, this is running the server, so you don't get confused, and a little bit of a different background. And actually, I'm going to demo that for you here in a minute. But the thing that's really nice about it, the kind of a feature that I didn't really think about, me and John were kind of talking about it, he mentioned this, was, if you're working on your desktop, your server may have access to things like, big data environments, or maybe a database, production database that you don't have access to from your desktop. Well, you can, once you deploy a workflow to the server, you can run that server remotely, or you can run that workflow remotely, and you can kind of maybe debug some problem you're having in production using that workflow with that interactive kind of back and forth interaction that KNIME supports. That's really great. So that's kind of a nice feature from that, right? That you have that remote access maybe into a secure environment. You have access to that secure environment, so it's not like you're breaking any security problems or causing any security problems, but it's just a nice way of doing that and gives you that access. So I'm going to do a quick demo of that, because it's really a brilliant feature, and it's one of my favorite new features. Okay, oh, there we go. So there's KNIME. Here's my KNIME server. It's actually running on this laptop. So I already deployed this, this workflow here. Let me just right-click on it. So there's a new menu called Open, and Open allows you, on the remote workflow, Open allows you to open the workflow or open it in web portal, and that allows me to see the job through a web portal. But I'm going to do new job. And what that does is now the server is actually running this workflow on the server, and you can see that kind of purple banner at the top that says this job is running on the KNIME server, and it tells you which server. Okay, but I can do things, like I said before, I can do things like configure. I can execute a single node. I can look at the output of that node, kind of browse through it. So it really looks like it's almost running locally. Now, we don't have every feature of the local editor implemented yet, but it's a great start. It's a good way to, I think it's almost fully featured. Okay, the gradient boosting trees taking just a little while. But you can see we're kind of getting status of this as it's going, right? You got the yellow, green, red thing going on, so you can kind of see what's happening. And this is really great for debugging. Even the JavaScript views work. So let me click on this table view. I can look at the view and then look at the output of that. All right. Now, if I decided, I don't like the way I did the partitioning. I did 85%. That's too high. I'm going to change this to 50. So I can actually change that. I can rerun it. And so again, kind of you're into that interactive debugging or interactive kind of fixing a problem of a workflow and doing it on the server without having to bring it back down onto your local machine. Okay, it reran. If I want to save this, I can actually, how do I do this? I'm not a Windows person. And it's a German keyboard. Okay, I don't know how to do that. But if I'll show you what I would have done. Oops, wrong one. If I click on Save All over here, where'd it go? If I click on Save All, it's actually going to save this as like a workflow job. I can then take that workflow job and say Save as a workflow. It's kind of convoluted, right? But we're actually working on for the spring release or for the summer release. We're actually working on a way to make that faster. But it does work that way today. Now this is a preview feature, so it's not installed by default. If you want to read more about it, if you go to docs.knime.com, go to KNIME Server, and there's a preview guide for 4.8.1, and that preview guide tells you all about this feature and how to use it and how to get started with it. Uh-oh, I better speed up. Okay, so that was a demo. I hope you enjoy that. Features. Thank you. Thank all the KNIME developers who did it. It's a brilliant feature. We already talked about distributed executors, so I won't talk about that again. So just a few general enhancements. The Explorer within the KNIME Analytics platform now uses the REST API completely. So it used to use the old API. It now uses the new one. It's much faster. It's much more efficient. Hopefully you'll enjoy it. We did several changes on our AWS and our Azure deployments so that we supported some new instance types that they have that are faster and have more memory. And we just had to make a few changes to support that. That's done. And we implemented several new recommendations for server hardening for security that are recommended by the CIS, or the Center for Internet Security. So again, just always kind of making sure that we're on top of security issues. Okay, what's cooking? We talked about KNIME Server Large and AWS. That's coming soon. More distributed executor functionality. So we're thinking of things like with you might have an executor running on a machine that has GPUs. You want jobs that need GPUs to be run on that executor. So is there some way we can kind of make that mapping and know that when that job runs, we have to run it on that particular executor or class of executors? that's one of the things we're thinking about. Also wanting to support Docker and Kubernetes. Actually, if you're using Kubernetes or you're interested in containerization, please talk to me because we really want to get customer feedback before we get too far with this. Just really like to hear your feedback. And different improvements to the scheduler, better daylight savings support, more notification settings. And this one's really cool, that you can actually have a workflow invoked whenever a scheduled workflow finishes. So that way, if it failed or if it's success, you can do what you want with it. You can make that decision. You can do calls into Slack. You can send email. Whatever you want to do, it gives you that full capability to do that. Lots of flexibility. OK, so that's it for me. I just wanted to share there's a workshop tomorrow on sharing and deploying data science with KNIME Server. Iris will be running that along with Roland. It's at 9:30 tomorrow morning and 11:30. So please, if you have time, join and learn more about KNIME Server. Thank you. Next.